haven't looked back since. Basically, we have, I think we're still the only, or at least the first community pharmacy in Australia to be approved to store S8, which is medicinal cannabis mainly, in our robot, and it makes dispensing a lot faster. Most pharmacies have little safes. We just couldn't keep it in there because we were doing such a huge volume, and it didn't make sense to get just a bigger safe to walk in. We can stock take within a second of what's in our robot, and it makes things just a lot easier with processing things. And plans forward is to just get a bigger site and build a lot more robots. Yes?
You're saying robot?
Yep. This here, that's a robot. It's not a robot like this. It's basically a big dispensing vending machine. That's all it is. On this side, we scan the product, put it in, the robot puts it away, and then once it's been dispensed, we've got a dispense label with a barcode on it. The pharmacist scans that. We put our PIN number in, which is like a lock and key for a safe, and then the robot outputs the S8 product and the medicinal cannabis. And then we scan, check it. We go through E-script, we go through Q-script. There's a whole lot of stuff that we've got to go through to check to make sure that's right. I know a lot of patients don't understand that, so like just stick a label on the jar and give it to me. There's a lot more involved in that, but things are getting a lot more streamlined over time. Next slide, please.
So is it untouched by human hand?
Not quite. Humans have got to still touch it and put it in, but yeah, we don't have to leave the station, go to a big safe, try and find what it is, could pick the wrong one, scan it, wrong one, go back. It just streamlines everything. The pharmacist can stay in one position and just keep scanning and checking everything. So this, it's a bit hard to read here. It says, what sort of brain do you want? People talking earlier on, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's and things like this. Nice smooth brain here. One with lots of divots in it. I know I want one on this side. A lot of people in life are going to end up with one like this. And part of my talk is talking about that, how medicinal cannabis is involved in that, but also lifestyle plays a big role in that as well. And at another talk that I was at where I met Michael, we're on the same page with what we put into our body as well on causing inflammation. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is basically what we're going to talk about today. So basically biomarkers, I've got an integrative medicine background, so I'm big into not just, what's your symptom, here's an anti-something. I like looking at biomarkers, looking at optimal levels, what they should be, because that's how optimally the body works. So we'll go through a bit of biomarkers, stress and mood, so your adrenals and sex hormones, has a huge effects on the body. We'll talk about a low carb, what that looks like. I don't want to say lies your doctors told you, but just what doctors learned back then. Things become unproven over time. So we talk about salt, cholesterol, saturated fats, carbohydrate, red meat, vitamin D, etc. We'll talk about medicinal cannabis therapy, the importance of terpenes, and how to dose your medicinal cannabis, and various, I've got a few vapes, MCART vapes, and for dried flowers here, if anyone wants to have a look afterwards as well. There'll be photos up on here as well. Next slide, please. All right, so biomarkers. Look at the top line there. Does an antidepressant make serotonin? It doesn't actually make serotonin. It stops the reuptake of serotonin to have more in the synaptic cleft, which then makes you happier. I like to look at biomarkers as to what makes up serotonin. It comes from tryptophan, comes from protein in our body, B group vitamins, zinc. All those cofactors are important, and that's where we like to test those biomarkers to make sure you've got adequate supply of that. So how does your hair and skin, your muscles, everything grow? From the foods we eat. And basically, most people are eating a highly inflammatory diet, which sets us up for all our huge chronic disease states. And also the function of the autonomic nervous system, flight and fight. Most people are in the flight and fight. Most of the patients that come into the pharmacy and medical room, that's the biggest issue is stress, and stress comes from lots of different factors out there. But we need to be able to rest and digest the parasympathetic nervous system. We need to upregulate that. Everyone's got their upregulated sympathetic nervous system. We've got to upregulate the parasympathetic nervous system, and there's various ways of doing that. Otherwise, the body's in overdrive and inflammatory disease states. Okay, next slide. So up the top, stress and mood, that's what it says, and adrenal issues up the top there. So a few of the symptoms are like not sleeping, difficult falling asleep or staying asleep, slow starter in the morning, craving salty foods, becoming dizzy when standing. These are some of the symptoms that people might get. We like to do then biomarker testing just to see what is actually happening. And then there's therapies that you can go from there. Next slide, please. All right, this is just some testing. I can make these slides available to Michael if anyone wants them to have a clearer picture, because I know it's hard to read. These are various tests that you can send to your doctor and get them to test it. The biggest thing I find when I send patients off for testing, I can test a lot of my own. I'm a pharmacist, not a doctor, but I can do functional testing. It's not covered under Medicare. That's why I like to send them off to their doctors to see if they can get it covered under Medicare. But a lot of the doctors will only test 2 out of 10 things I want to test, and then the test results will come back and they say, yeah, you're fine, but I'd say, no, you're still low. You're not at the optimal levels. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're still in stress and moods. What we see is a lot, morning cortisol, DHEA, your testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, inflammatory markers, especially this one, interleukins, TNF-alpha and all those sort of things. I'll be talking about that on our cytokine inflammatory markers. That's where I think there's a big interplay between medicinal cannabis, the endocannabinoid system, and cytokine pathways. And that's where medicinal cannabis helps those inflammatory markers, because there is good, bad and the ugly in those markers. They're not all bad. And also diet, a ketogenic diet, a low carbohydrate diet is very helpful in getting those back into swing as well. Next slide, please. This is just about gut function. We are what we can absorb if we're not absorbing it. A lot of people, due to stress, they get reflux, they go to the doctor puts them on a PPI, proton pump inhibitor, to reduce your stomach acid. Great doc, worked well. I don't have the reflux now, but you're not absorbing any of the nutrients that you're eating in your diet either. So that's a big thing as well. And they should only be used in short-term use anyway. PPIs, they have a place, but not for long-term use. Have a look at your digestion. Digestion is very important, because if that's not working correctly, that's where a lot of people get inflamed as well, and their biomarkers, vitamin D, zinc, all their vitamins and everything just go low, which is essential for health, to have them at the good levels. And we need stomach acid. I put a lot of people on betaine hydrochloride, and they say, what, you're going to give me more acid? Isn't that going to make my reflux worse? And probably 95% of people, it makes it better. It's the same symptom when you get reflux as to when you have low stomach acid. The symptoms are the same. You go to the doctor, I've got reflux, they put you on a PPI, but by putting on someone on acid, as in stomach acid, betaine hydrochloride is the main one that we use, and we use some enzymes in that as well. Basically helps with digestion. Then they start feeling better, less bloating, all those sort of things as well, because you need that stomach acid to help absorb everything. Next slide. So talking about a keto diet with low carb, sorry, it is hard to read. It says women, men, and basically your macronutrients. So protein, fats, and carbohydrates. They're the 3 main macros, and it's all about just modulating those around in the diet. And most diets are generally high in carb, tend to be low in fat, and only a small amount of protein. So you need to modulate that around, which then changes the biochemical processes in the body, and it changes it a lot. So the foods you put in your body do make a big difference on the biochemistry that you have set up. The body loves ketones, loves glucose as well, but it can produce its own glucose. It can only produce ketones when it's in a certain state. I believe more in a cyclic ketogenic diet. So you're still getting some good carbs coming through every now and then. But the easiest way to try and think about it is processed foods. Once you cut them out, you're then sticking to real whole foods. That's the best way. When I say whole food, that doesn't mean whole grain foods. I'm against them. But basically whole foods grown in the ground in its original way when you're cooking it in the kitchen, protein, vegetables and that. And plenty of good fats. And not processed seed oils and things like that. they're highly inflammatory fats. Next slide. This is what your plate could look like. It's a little bit hard to see, but basically it is having a higher amount of healthy fats, lower carb, and a good moderate amount of protein. Next slide. Okay, this one's what the fat. So the good, bad, and the ugly. Cholesterol. Still not highly understood in the main medical area. It's getting better with that. It's not all about your total cholesterol. It really has nothing to do with that. Cholesterol makes all your sex hormones. Who wants sex hormones? Everyone. So they're good for your long-term health. And a lot of people have depleted amounts of those, or their ratios are around the wrong way as well. So cholesterol is a good precursor to making all your hormones. And so having a good amount of cholesterol coming from animal fats, saturated fats, they're not clogging the arteries. And I'll explain that process shortly. This is just some, it is hard to read, so you can get the slides. Biomarkers, certain biomarkers, and what you're trying to look at from a health point of view. Next slide, please. This is just a study that was done there with regards to LDL and clogging my arteries. Basically, when you're talking about cholesterol, our body can make as much cholesterol as it wants. It doesn't have to come from the diet. It can make as much as it wants. So basically, an example of in a premenopausal woman, their cholesterol go up, the doctor will put them on a statin to control that cholesterol. The body's just naturally trying to make, because perimenopause, the body starts to reduce down its production of hormones. So the body then just kicks in from cholesterol to try and make more hormones for that person, for that lady. And doctors tend to put them on a statin instead of looking at to see how they can balance their hormones better. Because it's not about your total cholesterol. With the cholesterol, there's LDL, which most of the time it's just a formulation that how they derive at that number. I like to do is a subfraction test for LDL. It's a real test. It tests the good, bad, and the ugly of the LDL.
What's LDL?
Sorry?
What's LDL?
Low dense lipoprotein.
Okay.
Yep. So there's all different sizes in the cholesterol. It's all about the size of the lipoprotein. Protein, LDL are transporters in the body of your cholesterol and triglycerides around to all your cells for energy. It's not designed to clog your arteries, even though that's what's happening because of a high carbohydrate diet, glycating our LDLs, making them, a public transport system, taxis, buses, trains, on the road, transporting everyone around. As we're getting more glycation in, and if you're not servicing your vehicles properly, you've got a lot of taxis, buses on the side of the road, flat tyres not working properly. That's the glycated LDL, which is basically, that's clogging your arteries, not the cholesterol itself. And that's supposed to be a process where you do glycate through a small amount of carbohydrates in your diet. You should be glycating, but it's a natural process that gets recycled back into HDL in the body. But since we're eating a high carbohydrate diet, I like to tell people like an assembly, a conveyor belt, you're taking one bottle off every 10 seconds. On a normal low carbohydrate diet like we should be eating, a high carbohydrate diet, imagine 1,000 bottles coming through every 10 seconds. You just can't take them off. They smash everywhere and they can't get recycled properly. So that's basically what's happening with clogging arteries in cholesterol. Next slide, please. Anti-inflammatory. So basically, we want to be eating a diet higher in saturated fats, polyunsaturated fats. Like we could have a whole talk just on fats and all the different types of fats there are. Omega-3s, omega-6s, all the saturated, unsaturated, polyunsaturated. There's lots of different ones. But basically, there's, in a nutshell, anti-inflammatory fats and highly inflammatory fats, like I say, in the omega-6s or the canola oils, sunflower oils, all those sort of things. Next slide. Okay, so this is basically just a little graph I did on when you're putting food into your mouth, what's happening when it enters into the bloodstream. So basically on a higher carbohydrate diet, the red line, carbs build up in the blood, they have to get into your muscles through insulin, letting them in the door at the muscle, at the cell. So basically insulin spikes up, and people are doing this multiple times a day, and that's what's setting them up for inflammation and chronic disease states with that. On a lower carbohydrate diet, it doesn't have to necessarily be keto. There is a difference between low carb and keto. But basically, eating a higher fat, it doesn't spike your body with glucose and send out all that insulin. So you're moderating your insulin better. Insulin's important in the body, but just not spiking it all the time with the foods that we're eating. And it's quite amazing the people that go down the low carb way, the difference that it makes for them with their body stop aching, their brain switches on, and lots of benefits like that. And this phase down here is where you're getting hungry because you've overshot on your insulin, then you're hungry again, you had a massive meal, an hour later you're hungry again. So when you're on more of a low carb, you can actually miss a meal or stretch out your eating because you're not having this hunger phase happen. Next slide. All right, this is something I come up with. I saw just in everything that I was looking at and studying, a lot of things when something high, something else is low in the body, and just put together this slide. I know it's a bit hard to see, but basically that's high inflammation on that side with a lot of the disease states down here, diabetes, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, all those different disease states down there caused from high inflammatory states. To this side, which is autophagy, when basically you restrict eating no protein. For a period of time you go into autophagy. And in the middle is where most people should be, cyclic keto, where you're on the other side, you're eating a small amount of carbs, not a high amount of carbs, which is more inflammatory, coming into more of a ketogenic state and cycling back out of that. And people do lots of different ways, whether they're doing the daily or weekly thing. Some people fast one day a week. There's lots of different ways of doing it. I like to back it up with biomarkers to see what's happening in the body once you start something like this. But the biggest thing is trying to get your doctor to understand what you're actually doing. Luckily enough, there's lots of papers out there now to back all this up. Next slide. And the foods we eat. So something that might be high in iron or high in protein, high in zinc. There's an oyster, that's an oyster on that side. Oyster by itself, the zinc out of it absorbs really well. Down here is basically an oyster eaten with some fibre, so plant-based products. Plant-based products, yes, they are good for us with regards to the fibre, but if something's high in protein, high in zinc, or high in iron, or high in something, most of the time it all gets tied up in that plant. So in digestion, a lot of it doesn't get entered into the bloodstream because the plant is due to its fibre, is basically holding all the nutrients up. Next slide. So with your brain, that's got Alzheimer's on there, a healthy brain. So what I've just been saying in the slides is basically with this is inflammation within our body sets us up for all these disease states. And I know I'd rather have a brain like this. And basically, diet has a lot to do with it. With regards to that, what we're putting in our mouth to see what our inflammatory states are in our body. Next slide. Okay, so some of these things, I don't want to say the lies your doctor told you, but they can only do what they've got research and what they've got evidence on. But basically, there's a lot of other things coming out now with the studies. With we just spoke about cholesterol and saturated fats, that's salt causing high blood pressure. Don't get me wrong, there's some polymorphisms within salt and kidney function that should restrict salt, but overall there's a mechanism that we've all been told to go low fat, low salt, and that's setting up the body for a certain way of reacting to things. When we go low salt, basically aldosterone comes out, tightens up the arteries to try and, in the kidney, restrict sodium from going out, and that's causing blood pressure to rise. I put people on more salt, their blood pressure comes down because that process gets reversed. But that doesn't happen in everyone. That's why genetics is a good thing as well, to see genetic markers to see what they're doing. What do we got here? Carbohydrates. There's no such thing as an essential carbohydrates. There is an essential fat and essential amino acids. Vitamin D, very good to have vitamin D levels. Should we be staying out of the sun? I was talking to a dermatologist just the other day. And where we're mostly going wrong, we're staying out of the sun, and we should basically have that short exposure, not getting burnt, but that short exposure to build the skin up. And unfortunately, we've been brought up in a way that we're slip, slop, slap, that we're just not allowing that to happen. So if that's not happening, then you've got to keep going down that way of basically slip, slop, slapping, keeping yourself protected. I'm a big believer in vitamin D. It's not really a vitamin, it is actually a hormone due to its structure. Next slide. Okay, medicinal cannabis. We do compound it. We compound from distillates that we get in, THC, CBD. We don't compound much. I don't want to compound lots. We just, for patients' cares that can't have a certain carrier oil, MCT, they want olive oil or whatever carrier oil base, or the doctor wants something in a different percentage than what's on the market. Because we're not manufacturers, we're compounders, we have to compound per script. We're not bulk producers, so that's the difference with compounding and manufacturing. We're probably one of the busiest dispensaries in Australia with regards to medicinal cannabis, and having our robot definitely helps with that. And also we work with a lot of big clinics, but anyone with a script can submit their script to us for that. Next slide, please. So with this one, basically it's just got all the different cannabinoids there, as the other speakers spoke about today. There are other ones, and the area that I'm interested in is, there's THC and CBD, but there's all the other cannabinoids that are out there, which I think in time we'll start seeing showing up in more products. But we're still early days with that. There's some products that do have them in, but still early days. And then basically they're good for, it's got a listed there, it's a bit hard to read there, but some have better anti-inflammatory properties. Some have, they're all getting different properties to that different cannabinoid. And that's, I think, is going to be interesting moving forward with that. Next slide. So our endocannabinoid system, we've got our CB1, CB2 receptors, where our THC mainly works on the CB1, and the CB2 receptors is cannabidiol. CBD mainly works in between that, with that, but basically by interacting with the CB1 receptor is more for the central nervous. That's why it's very good for pain. With that, where immune function is more when you activate the CB2 receptor. And that's why when a doctor's prescribing it, they are prescribing both THC and CBD to help activate both those receptors to help the overall endocannabinoid system. Because getting that, I like to look at it as a balance. I did an Actum course a few years ago, and the best thing I got, there was a lot of biochemistry in it. The best thing I got out of it was basically THC. THC helps bring down the bad inflammatory markers. CBD helps raise up the good ones. And you want to try and have a good balance. You don't want too much of one and too much of another. And that's where your cytokines come in on TH1 and TH2. All your cytokines fall into those groups. So you've got the good, bad and the ugly with those. And that's why I think a ketogenic diet or a low-carb diet, so a low-inflammatory diet, mixed with medicinal cannabis, is definitely the way to go for longevity and best health. Next slide. So THC, as you can see, used for anxiety and pain and all these glaucoma and low appetite and anti-inflammatory, different things that THC can be used for. Next slide. It's just for CBD. Got a fair few things there. And under the TGA with regards to what a doctor can prescribe them for. Hopefully over time, more and more things are coming out, which is great. More and more studies are being done. Once, with the evidence there, then doctors have more confidence in prescribing. A story I was talking to, a psychiatrist came into the pharmacy. He does a lot of work with addiction. And I spoke to him about medicinal cannabis, about being used for addiction a few months ago. And he goes, no good with that. That'd be no good for my patients. I got a phone call 2 days ago. He's trying to look for me. I was busy in the pharmacy and couldn't take the call. Trying to look for me. He finally got on to me. He goes, Des, I was at a conference down in Melbourne last weekend, and they were talking about cannabidiol and addiction. He goes, you're the first person I thought of as soon as I was at the conference that I've got to get in contact when I come back. So that's why I like chatting with doctors, putting something into their mind. They may not believe it at the time, But until they catch up on the research, what's happening, they attend a conference, hear about something, then they contact you and go, right, how do we get started on that? And that's what's happening in medicinal cannabis. They may not believe it. Their mother, their father, or someone else gets sick, they do actually try something, then they go, oh wow, that changed everything. Then they start researching it more, and then they see that the research is there. Next slide. Okay, so sorry, it's a bit hard to read, but these are all the different, this is a really good slide, all the different cannabinoids and their different uses, and that's where it's going to get more customizable. So if you go to the doctor and you've got certain disease state and they go, this, if you've got your flour or your oil that's more highly concentrated in this cannabinoid, it's going to do slightly better for you than just the general run-of-the-mill one. I think that's where it's going to go with more customisation in things like this, and possibly that's where the uses of compounding pharmacy will be, as we probably don't compound as much THC, CBD oils, because there's more companies out there doing it in the certain blends, so that we won't be able to compound them then. But as these other cannabinoids come in, if we can then get those, start adding them into products, that's where you can start specialising in compounding, and that's where products happen. They work down that line until a wholesaler starts doing it themselves. Next slide.
Did you want me just to read the highlights of that?
If you can, yes.
I'll be
there's
real
a lot
quick.
to it.
I'll be real quick.
Yep.
So essentially the THC acids are inflammation, nausea, vomiting, neuroprotection, seizures, CBG aids diabetes, cancer, CBG's inflammation, colitis, neuroprotection, cancer, anorexia. And then it goes CBDV, seizures, autism, muscular dystrophy, CBCA, pain, nausea, appetites, CBDA, pain, nausea, lots of pain, nausea for all of these.
Yeah.
CBN, inflammation, pain, bacterial infections. CBD, epilepsy, multiple sclerosis, migraines actually, it's interesting, bacterial infections. And CBC is pain, inflammation, neuroprotection, cancer and bacterial infections.
So yeah, as you can see, then you can start getting more customisable, more specialised in those, and I think that's where it's going. Okay, so medicinal cannabis, as Ben was talking about, so the special access scheme, there's category A and B, most go down the B line. Authorised prescribers, which we love, it enables us to keep stock to be able to get product to patients a lot quicker, out to patients a lot faster because we have stock of a lot of products. We can get it out straight away, we post Australia-wide, we can probably get it to a patient quicker than them going to their local pharmacy because they've got to order it, get it in. So we're a lot faster with that. And now with all the different category bases of the TGA 1 to 5, because it was a nightmare when things would go out of stock of a certain product, we'd have to send it back to the doctor, not only get re-scripted, but a new TGA, when that's how there was TGA per product. With the categories, it is working a lot better from a pharmacy point of view, where when something is out of stock, we call the doctor, either annotate the script or get a new script, then we can change it to something else if the doctor agrees and the patient agrees. So it does streamline the process. I think there's still a bit of a way to go, but it is a lot easier than what it was. Next slide. Okay, so dosing medicinal cannabis? So I'll just pop over here. So these are the latest things, which I think they're going to take off because a lot of our patients, from an oil to flour, a lot of our patients do like the flour. It's instantaneous. They love all the terpene profiles and everything, even though the oils do have some of those in there as well. But these little M-carts, they're called. The little cartridges, this is a 1/2 mil, you can get 1 mil. My robot loves them because we can fit a lot more in our robot, otherwise we've got to fit these big tubs in. But a lot of people who are taking the flour find these really good. They've got terpene profiles in there. It's the THC or CBD distillates that are used in here. And they just basically, that they can take anywhere with them. That's for people on the go. And when they get home, then they can use the other vape machines and things like that. So you can still use flour. With this at the moment, it's about 3 or 4 times the cost per milligram of cannabinoid, but it's very convenient. So they've been out for, probably about a year or so, I think, the M-carts. But most companies are starting to bring them out right now. So I think that's going to be a game changer for a lot of people, but it just gives people more options on how to dose. And they're the things that you probably get, all those different customisable forms, CBG, CBV, all the different things in there that you can actually then put into these little things. I think they're going to be very handy. That's just another version, like in a little pen. the Mighty Medic, which is the only TGA registered vape. It is a bigger one compared to other things that are out of the market. There are still some other very good vapes out there. Basically, hang on, I'm just trying to open up the top here, grind your flour up. I'll show you some grinders, weigh it, pop it in there, and the best, you don't have to get all your dose from your first draw. Basically, some patients were whacking it in 200, 210 degrees, and then they were coughing it all out because it hit it in the back of their throat, caused irritation, they coughed their dose up. We find the best way, 180 degrees, take your first draw from that, hold it in. You can increase the temperature on these, 180 up to 190 or 195. Take another draw from that same dose, and then increase it again up to 200, 205. You play around with it, see what works best. Just so you've got your main actives, THC, CBD, come out less than 180, about 156, 170, and then your terpenes come off after that. So that way you're just getting that evenly dose out. You're going to absorb most of that dose rather than cough it out or anything like that. We find that works best for a lot of people, rather than just set it high and just try and take your dose in. Yeah, Sandra?
So are they all vapes? They all considered vapes, even the pen?
Yes, it gets a bit confusing because people go, wow, look at this little one, I can put my flour and vape that. It's called a vape, but we call it Harp vape. There'll be other names that'll come out. This actual machine is called a Silo Jupiter. But it's all still called vaping, even though this is just in its own little canister, and it's more of it's a distillate, looks like an oil, but none of the nasties in there.
So they've kind of stolen the vaping word to just apply it to everything in the medical thing saying vaping.
Well,
Because it's not really...
when we say vaping, because this is heating it up to a temperature in the, I don't want to say traditional vapes, but the vapes where most doctors are getting their patients to use for a dried flower, it's not burning it, it's getting up. The aromatics are basically, they're volatile at that temperature and they're coming off and you're inhaling it. It's not smoke. A lot of people think it's smoke. It's not. They don't have big plumes of smoke like you see if you go to your vape shop and get your flavoured vapes or whatever. When they see this big plume of smoke, they're not like that. They're different. They don't contain all those nasties as well. Well, this is natural flour that's in that, and that one's just the distillate generally with other terpenes added back in, and then they can get a profile.
Sorry, I'm a bit dull, I'm a bit confused now. So the littlest one that you had,
Yep.
is that flour that you put in yourself, or is that something different?
No, this is a distillate. It looks like an oil, but it's not an oil because you can't vape MCT oil. So it's not an oil, it looks like an oil, but it's a distillate that they've formulated specially to go in these little cartridges. So there's no dried flour in there, but they work very similar to a dried flour. A lot of our patients who moved on to these, they were really impressed with them, said they were just as happy using this to the dried flour. The only thing is the price, like it's about 3 times as much, but the price is coming down because as more companies enter the market with these.
So
Yeah.
is that still considered, given that we're not allowed to vape in the hospitals, is that still considered a vape?
Okay, I'll probably put it under a TGA category. Let's just say it's a high THC product, category 5. You have an oil, you have an inhalation. This is considered an inhalation, and that's a dried flower. So from a doctor point of view, for writing a script, if they give us a TGA for a dried flower, but they wrote a script for one of these M carts, we have to ask them for another authority with that because that's an inhalation. Yeah, you still have a small amount of, I don't want to call it smoke, but vape coming out, only a very small amount. Most of it you want into your lungs because that's where you're going to get the delivery of the medicine.
So would that be much different than the spray bottles that were spraying inside the tube?
Well, they're either buccal or sublingual oils, and you can't vape the oils. Yeah, so with those, a lot of people get these machines thinking they can vape their oil, and some people do, but it's from a pharmacy and a doctor point of view. We can't tell them to vape their oils because of the MCT and the big issues with vapes, propylene glycol, vitamin E, all those sort of things, which is causing all those lung issues.
Please speak up so we can hear.
So what we're talking about is when people go to hospital, on the Gold Coast, I can only talk about, they're allowed now to take in their prescribed medicinal cannabis
Oh, look, it's small enough. It will still let off a small aroma because it's got terpenes and everything in there. Not as much as the flower, but I think they would still say no because as soon as you say vape, they just go no. I can't comment. But I think if you're going to go to hospital, if you planned it enough that you'd have to go back to the oils for a short amount of time, would be better than having no product at all. Just if you are going to, hopefully some planned trips to hospital are planned, that you can work that out with your doctor to go back to an oil. Yes, Ben?
Are you saying you should breathe it into your pillow in hospital? It's a lot less vapour coming off. And yes, the pillow will work.
And I do believe in the hospital wards and have an ensuite. That's not too bad even if you're on the shower.
Two pillows.
Oh, wow, that's good. You're right, yep.
Debs, come to it.
Exactly, yep. Yeah, well, the more times they see it come through, even if they're just still saying no, we see even some nurses that we are dispensing for, they're seeing it's more and more in the hospital, and that's the only way it's going to get there. The more they see it, knocking it back, just like psilocybin, look at it, it's just been passed. It got knocked back, now it's been passed. People power, just keep on doing it, and then they'll change things over time. Maybe not overnight. With regards to your, it's vaporising, which is different to smoking. Yes.
Many hospitals have 4 bedrooms. Is it possible to co-locate the people who want to vape their beds in together?
That would be interesting. You'd have to ask the nurses like Deb and that, because that's not my area. But
apparently very well secured behind a curtain.
Just to get back to the subject, I think, and the presenter, I think essentially we can safely say that in a hospital, tablets and capsules and medicinal spoonfuls are acceptable generally as practice, traditionally.
Yeah, which is good that is. That's great. My mum was just in hospital this week, pacemaker replaced, and the anaesthetist was happy that she was on THC, didn't have an issue, and she could use it. These are oils in hospital, so that was great. I had to educate the nurse a bit because mum was in a bit of pain. She said, oh, we'll give you your CBD, and CBD, still okay for pain, but she should have been having a THC then instead. Yes?
Where are those small, what's it called?
The M carts?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How are they dispensed?
So that's like that. It's dispensed in an outer little cardboard box, but basically you can get them from any pharmacy. We keep them in stock. There's more and more. We're adding more and more as the companies come out with the M carts. I'm stocking them because I think they're really going to take off. It's just about getting to doctors writing scripts. We just see larger volumes, so we start stocking more and more.
So any pharmacy?
Yeah, basically, because you can get any of this from any pharmacy. It's just if you go there, they may not understand what are you talking about. Oh, it's going to take a week to order it in. There's all the other things that you might come up against. With us, as we keep a lot of stock of things, you can basically come in and walk out with it straight away, or we can post it to you. But basically, any pharmacy can get these in. Some don't want to, some say it's too hard, so that's why some pharmacies like myself, where we're basically specialising in this, we get pharmacies referring to us because they just don't want to order it in and go through the whole rigmarole if they're only doing, a couple a week. That's what I've spoken to some pharmacists, they just don't want to do it, but it is part of main pharmacy now. No, you need a prescription. Yeah. At the moment, nothing's available over the counter. Hopefully, whenever it'll be, there'll be a pharmacist, CBD only, products available when they come out. The TGA got to approve those because when I first heard that, I thought, I'm a compound, I can do CBD. I called up the TGA and they said, step away. You can only do TGA registered CBD products for pharmacists only. So that's, I know Ben was saying maybe later this year, who knows when, they've been saying shortly. It's come up with the wholesalers, the companies who are working on it, doing the studies to get it to the, it all just takes time to do all that.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yep.
The little device in your hand, what's it called again?
Well, this one is called an M-Cart.
Okay,
it's a Canatrek product.
Right.
Ben, is M-Cart just for Canatrek, or is M-Cart considered the actual...
All right, let's just go with M-Cart. Is it heated?
Yeah, Urban Leaf. Yep.
My question is it heated up at all?
Yes.
Right, and then my next question is...
This is a battery.
There's some discussions about carrier oils becoming carcinogenic or something like that, and vaping oils, carrier oils could be bad. What's your stance on that product? Do you know what the carrier oil is?
Yes, so they don't have a carrier oil. They're distillates that are used in these, and they don't have those like the e-cigarettes. Yes, that's the thing, that don't compare them to an e-cigarette. Then they're not the same. Because
alcohol solvent, propylene glycol, vegetable glycerine. That one mixture, and that one particularly is, from memory, I think it's 80-20 PG to VG, so 80% propylene glycol with a little bit of vegetable glycerine.
Propylene glycol, vegetable glycerine, just for the...
It doesn't have anything like vitamin E, acetate, should never be put in them, which is problems.
yeah, they're the big issues.
THC and CBD comes with a spectrum, got the CBD ones, the blends.
No vitamin E, and then you've got your cannabinoids. Okay.
And the only issue that we've seen with people on these, if they're not cleaning them properly with isopropyl alcohol, that because there are a higher concentrate of distillates in there, that they can sometimes clog, because that's when we buy our distillates in, the THC looks like golden syrup, the CBD is very, very crystallised. They can just crystallise out and block it, so cleaning is a big thing with these. Heat the thing up, so at least...
And then if anyone asks you in the hospital, what's that smell? You say, well, I just sprayed nimbin by Chanel.
So yeah, I think they're going to be very interesting in the marketplace with that. I think I'm almost done, I'm not sure. Can we go on to the next slide? Terpenes. We're talking about terpenes. Have I got time? Yeah. So terpenes, because sativa indica's been the main thing, thin leaf with sativa and thicker leaf with the indica. That's how they've basically done something, sativa more uplifting and indica more sedating. It's not quite like that. We see a lot of patients that go, that should be a sativa and it's made me fall asleep, or vice versa. It all comes down to the terpene profiles of those, because a lot of with the hybridisation, the cultivars have changed, and now they're getting them into 4 categories now: earth, fuel, floral and flower. And they have their genetics of the plant that happens to fall into that, which gives the, which all come about from the terpene profiles, because they've all been hybridised so much. So something could be uplifting but be a thick leaf, which is usually more of a sedating style. Where else did I want to go with these? I can't even read most of that myself, and I'm right up here.
I can read anything for you.
Oh, okay.
Do you want me to quick...
Oh, look at that. Cholesterols are actually terpenes. I like this line. And fundamental for cell signalling and lipid membranes. What more do I have to say about cholesterol? It's a terpene. It's actually cell signalling. It's huge. It's all about clogging arteries. I spoke about that. Glycating LDL, that clogs arteries. Next slide, please. I think I've got a few to go through here. Down below on that other one, full spectrum versus isolate. Probably less than 1% of what we dispense is considered an isolate. It's not popular. Most of the things we do are the broad or full spectrum base. We just don't do it. Otherwise, we'd have very little in our dispensary. We'd just have a couple of lines of THC and CBD capsules. No one wants them. Just full of isolate. No one wants them. All right, so this here, going through with the terpenes, very similar. So up the top, pain, anxiety, depression. So you've got the cannabinoids, which we were talking about before, have their certain, are helpful in the body for certain states, disease states and things, symptoms. And the terpenes act on that as well. There was one article I read once, it was 20 to 25% of the activity comes from terpenes. That's why they say that have that synergistic effect. Trying to prove that, I think it's a bit hard. I don't think it's been totally proven. But who knows over time with that. But all our patients, they all want the terpenes in their mix, and basically some patients go, oh, how much THC has that got in it? And over time we're seeing patients come down from their 30% down to their 18% because they like it better because of the terpene profile of that particular cultivar. So these are the 4 types I was talking about, the fuel, floral, fruit and earth. What they taste like, look at this one, the fuel, gasoline. I was at a workshop a couple of months ago, and they let us handle all the different types. We had to actually, like a wine connoisseur, trying to say what it was, and it was really interesting with all the different types there, and then what they can actually do. So that on a clearer slide. So I'll make these slides available to Michael so you can see that a lot clearer because it is helpful information. Sorry, Ben, you are first.
What's the most popular strains for patients going out at the moment?
Strains. The Kushes are always pretty good. They like a lot of that. My next endeavour to do is to, now that this is out there, because a lot of doctors don't even understand sativa and indica. These are the new doctors, not like Ben, who's experienced in it. The new doctors, they're not even too sure. So I want to get together something with all the cultivars that are out there that fall under here, and especially with substituting if something is out of stock, or getting a doctor to refer to me to be able to then put the patient on the best form if they're inexperienced in it, because you've got the experienced medicinal cannabis doctors and those that are inexperienced. You get a lot of GPs that they're happy to write a script, which is great, but they just don't know anything about it. So that's where I want to offer that service moving forward, that we can do that as long as everyone's in the loop. The patient's happy, the doctor's happy, pharmacist's giving advice there, the doctor knows what they're on, so in their history they can see what the patient's taking, if the patient's happy, because it's not a one-size-fits-all model either. It is customised medication, and just because that flower worked well for you, it may not work for the other person. And that's got to do with your own genetics as well. Yep.
Your mention of your mother's, I think, pacemaker.
Yes.
Triggered my head. Cannabis products have a tendency to help regulate one's nervous system. Correct?
They can do, yep. Sometimes THC can up it, but then over time will bring it down. CBD, yes. Yep.
People tend to need to be fitted with pacemakers because their nervous system isn't correctly regulating the beat. Can cannabis products help to more naturally regulate the beat of the heart?
Look, I'm not a cardiologist or anything with that, or I'm not a specialist in that area. I wouldn't say take medicinal cannabis and not get a pacemaker. There's a lot of work involved in that, and testing and everything else like that. But from a nervous system, helping with anxiety and things like that through various mechanisms with neurotransmitter upregulation and receptors, yes. I think we still don't know enough about the endocannabinoid system. We're still studying on the far-reaching effects that it has in the body, and we're still learning all about that. So I don't want to go any further with that, as in, could you use that instead of getting a pacemaker? Is that what you're saying?
Now,
I know it's definitely helpful for...
whether the use of
Well, from my point of view, with an artificial, it's taken a lot of time to get to that point. Could be genetics involved, there's all that stress, inflammation, everything else in the body to get to that point. Maybe you could prolong that with the use of lifestyle things, diet, medicinal cannabis, meditation, like all those sort of things probably tie in to possibly push that out further if you even need it or not. It's a possibility, yeah. There's lots of things tied up in the body on what causes certain disease states and pathways in the body with that. But modulating, I think it's never one thing. That's what I'm saying. We've got diet, we've got medicinal cannabis, there's down-regulating or up-regulating parasympathetic nervous system, which you can do through a whole series of things as well, exercise, meditation, all those sort of things. Really, really helpful in up-regulating parasympathetic and down-regulating sympathetic. All those sort of things come into play with it all. You can use medications that help up-regulate and down-regulate those. All depends which way a person wants to go in life. Yeah. Next slide, please. Tips and tricks for the best outcomes. As I've been saying, low inflammatory diets, low carb is one of them. Lots of studies coming out. I was just at a low carb conference last October. Because of COVID, we didn't have the conference for a little while, but the studies kept on going. All the results are out from the studies. They're reversing diabetes, which is huge, massive. Reversing diabetes and taking people off medications is pretty massive. I'm a pharmacist, I dispense medications, but I like to look at biochemistry and see what's going on to see if you need something or not. Other things, so tips and tricks, so endocannabinoid system, fish oil helps up-regulate the anandamide recycling. PEA. Yes, yep, very useful too, yep. PEA, which stands for Ben might be able to help me out, that's a big long word. I've got it in a brochure in my bag there. But PEA is a short term for it. It's a really good pain modulator in that as well from a receptor point of view, but basically it helps upregulate the cannabinoid receptors as well, and a natural pain reliever. We do sell a fair bit of it at work as a synergistic product to help people with their medicinal cannabis therapy, and in some cases they reduce their dose by half with the use of PEA as well. I've got the mechanisms in a bag here if anyone wants to go through them. I can't remember them off the top of my head. TRIP, V1, all these other sort of things tying in with the medicinal cannabis. Yep.
I was just going to say, the ladies in our group that have had a lot of pain with cancer have actually gone to that PEA as well that can't get the medicinal cannabis.
Oh yeah, yep.
And it's a herb, you can get it from a herb shop as well.
It's a natural product, it's not a prescription. We sell at our compounding pharmacies, a lot more practitioner lines out now.
It's not ridiculously expensive.
No, it's not.
It won't harm you.
The dosages can be quite high with that, so you do use a fair bit. Mainly got to build the dose first up over the first month to get the receptors used to it, then you can start reducing the dose down. What else is there? N-acetylcysteine, NAC N-acetylcysteine, and olive oil, hydroxytyrosol from olive oil helps regulate your endocannabinoid system. These are little tips we try and give people when they're established. Something's gone wrong, it's not quite working. A lot of people blame, it's the flower. It can be the flower, might be something wrong. We can investigate that for them. But I like to look at their biochemistry, what else is going on, stress in their life, all this other sort of stuff as to why their medication's not working for them. Because our body changes all the time. You can't expect the medication to have the same effect every single time. It does how fast you're metabolising something, you speed it up, slow it down, different things in your body, different herbs you're taking, different supplements, all sorts of different things have an effect on the body. An example here, a customer comes in and we ask him, you only got 4 tubs last week and you want another 4 tubs, what's going on? My anxiety's become worse. They started using some THC to help with their anxiety. And they go, wow, it really worked for me really well. So they're increasing their dose. And basically like a bell curve down the bottom where they got the symptoms, they add a bit of THC, it's working well. They get up the top half where the more THC they take, the worse anxiety gets for them. So THC is very good for anxiety in low amounts but not in high amounts, so THC is great for pain. So we often get them, refer them back to their doctor. We'll put them on something like PEA to help upregulate their receptors, because some of the time their receptors start shutting down. And we also say, did your doctor give you a script for CBD? They said, yeah, that doesn't do anything to me. I said, it does. Within a week they come back, they're on the CBD, they've had some PEA, they've halved their dose of flower, and they're feeling great. So that's my job as a pharmacist, what I like to do in that. Otherwise, if, oh yeah, here we go, another 4 tubs, and you never pick them up on anything, you know, they get a bit shitty at you, picking up on them, sort of like, how come you won't give me a medication because you're too early? You know, we've got refill intervals and things like that we've got to stick with. And if they're using more, either refer them back to their doctor so the doctor can write on the script now they're on 2 grams a day rather than 1, unless they've done a repeat interval. So we calculate that all out. But then we can see if their anxiety's gotten worse, we can try and help talk them through their physiology of what's happening inside their body as to how we can reverse that. It's not about taking more. When you've got to tell someone you're going to take less, they go, what? It's supposed to be helping me. Yeah, take less and you'll actually get better help from your THC that you're taking there, because you need less of it now. You need to upregulate your receptor signalling with some CBD. Yes?
What do you, why do they prescribe THC for anxiety?
Well, they would be on CBD as well. A little bit of THC is helpful. It's not that it's not helpful, but it is helpful. But they then start to go, like most humans, a small bit was good, a big bit must be better, and that's not the case with that. Yeah, it's all about the receptor system. Another girl came in and said, I only want to treat my pain with medicinal cannabis. And I think that's fair enough. But what she had done, she'd had an operation, she was in a lot of pain, she had flooded her system with THC, her receptors shut down, and she was using through a lot. I need to get more. I then contacted her doctor and told her what I said to do. She didn't want to go on the endones and plexis and all that. I said, look, it may not be what you want to do, but you've flooded your basically receptor system with your THC. It's not having an effect for you now. So go back on to, yes, the traditional, but it might only be for a week. And then basically you can come back off that and then control it again with THC. She came back a week later and was happy as it worked for her. Otherwise, she was just struggling with her receptors were blocked up with too much THC. That's what the body has. It's homeostasis, it's feedback mechanisms. When there's too much, it'll just shut down and go, no, I don't need it. And so it's not having that effect. And I said, you're in pain. We want to target in your body all the different pain receptors there, target them across to get you pain-free if we can for that healing. She was still in the healing phase from an operation that she'd had, and she was in a lot of pain. That helped. I told the doctor was happy with that response, and then she came back in, went off her main, the opioids and everything, because that was helpful for that short amount of time. There is a place in therapy for them, and then she was able to get back on her medicinal cannabis therapy, and she's fine now. Someone had a question?
Really loud, okay. So if you've been on THC and CBD for a while, I've just heard recently that you need to take a break off it to reset.
Yeah. As I said, like the body, feedback loops in the body. Too much of one thing, I don't want to generalise here, the body then gets used to something and shuts down. Dieting, I'm losing all this weight, bang, it stops. The body gets smart. There's all these feedback loops. So there's things that we can do like PEA, reducing your dose, having a bit of a break, just to reduce down your levels so the receptors aren't being shut down. But you don't want to reduce it down that you're in a lot of pain either. You want to be somewhere in between that. And there's various things that you can do to help with that. I would say everyone, it's all customisable to the person. Everyone's story is different. Your pain level could be different to the other pain level. If they miss their dose, their life is hard for them, where another one might be able to go down a little bit less. Just like someone's daily maintenance dose is different to the next person. So it just all depends. That's why you've just got to customise it, talk it over with your doctor, your pharmacist, your health professional, just to see what you need to do. Next slide, please. These are the vapes here. There's lots of different vapes and that. These are the M carts, little tiny things here. That's a little battery pack. Come up and have a look at the ones up here. I'll show you the demo models we have here. There's grinders to grind the flour. We have scales and that. There's even a little battery operated grinder. So there's lots of different things on how you can do things.
Is there some flour there?
No, there's no flour in that one. Yeah, so all your different vapes. It does make a big difference to smoking. The heat, you're not actually drawing in all that smoke, which they're having the harmful effects. But most people we convert over to using vapes. Even if it's just the cheaper vape, I think this one's about 150, all the way up to the Mighty Medic we sell for 420. I think we're the cheapest around. Most places sell them for about 450. As soon as they start to use those vapes, they generally reduce down their daily amount of flour that they use because it's not going into the atmosphere. You're getting it into your lungs.
We sell all of those in Campbell's, except for the one on the right, and your meat cuts.
Oh yeah, yep.
Vaporizers, flour vaporizers are up there.
All right, so that's your vaporisers. Come up and have a look at these ones. I bought just some selected ones here. Next slide. I think we're almost done. We do a lot of dispensing with Can I Help? I like them because of their compassionate program they have, 15, 30 and 50% off. We don't control that, they do. Your doctor can apply through it as well. They're the ones that approve you, we don't. They just send us the discount on what to dispense it for. And then we send them a report at the end of each week on what we've dispensed. It is helping out a lot of people because medicinal cannabis, isn't the cheapest thing. A lot of people are getting so much benefit from it, and if they can get a bit of a discount from it as well, it does save them a little bit of money with that.
Sorry, that slide says face-to-face or telehealth consults for compassionate access scheme. Can you just explain that?
Yeah, so Can I Help is been traditionally a telehealth model, but in each state they're trying to set up face-to-face as well. My clinic offers the face-to-face in rooms, so we have the doctors in rooms where they're doing telehealth and face-to-face appointments, and you can just book it. There's a QR code there. Go online, Can I Help, and then you can find it through there as well. Next slide. We've got a new ordering portal which has just made everything change quite a fair bit than traditionally taking phone orders. We've got an ordering portal, upload your e-scripts, we send you a link for payment, goes into our dispense queue, you can track it online yourself to see where it's up to, send you all the post-tracking information and that as well. Streamlined compared to, because most people can't get through on the phone because we're so busy. So I could see that happening. It was frustrating a lot of our customers, but our ordering portal makes a big difference with ordering. The biggest issue was trying to get card payment because most of the Visas and MasterCards wouldn't take payment for medicinal cannabis, but we've been able to overcome it with another company. Next slide. Okay, that's it. Any questions? I know we've been doing questions throughout it all.
I'm sure there's lots of questions. If you can just repeat the questions so we can all hear. Open to the floor. Any questions? I have one question just to start off with.
Yep.
I've heard of a product, I don't know if you've heard about this. It's like a Ventolin nebulizer. Essentially it's CBD, but I imagine you can do THC, loaded in oxygen, and you...
Overseas, it'd probably be overseas. I haven't myself, but it could be a good way of dosing for patients that either can't inhale through these, need a nebulizer. There's things that we can compound with them or dry powder forms that you put into the liquid to nebulise. I think that'd be the hardest part of nebulizing the water salt solution. That's because the lipophilic nature of medicinal cannabis. Ben, do you have heard anything like that, or?
That sounds, you have to do it in an alcohol base.
Yeah.
Propylene glycol, vegetable glycerin, and it would be Darth Vader-esque. The amount of vapor that you take in there, and the PG would irritate the shit out of you.
I do know of one American product, which is oxygen and CBD and
It's going to shake it like, it's
Yes.
inside and that pressurized canister.
It's like I get phone calls all the time from lots of different companies. It's really interesting where the research is being done. Someone wanted to research into another different cannabinoid, CBG or something like that, I can't remember, inhale, and they're looking and doing an inhaled form for that through a little like a Asmol Ventolin style thing. It's still in research phase, it's not out yet, but that's what they're looking. So there's lots of companies working on lots of different things. So, oh yeah, it's not real good there. So My Life, My Health, if you just type that in, that's the website, My Life, My Health.
For those that are interested, I'll put this PowerPoint show, if you're okay with that, on YouTube. I'll have less of you and more of the slideshow.
Yeah, I'm happy for that. Yeah. Okay. Yes, yeah.
I just want to, it's not really a question, it's just a statement. I just want to say we're very mindful, and this is absolutely no slide on anything you said, but I just want to say we're very mindful of taking on board a statement that says high THC is no good for anxiety, or high CBD is no good for this, or high this and that is no good for that. And because it's an individual response. You've all got your own receptors, it's individual. I've had patients, and I can say this personally, truthfully, I've had patients that have used high THC for anxiety successfully. They don't have any psychosis or any issues with it. I've had patients that cannot use high THC for anxiety because it does induce that palpitation, the panic attack, the racing heart, really crappy shitty feeling. That's why it's an independent thing where you need to have good practitioners like Tess, Ben, whoever, that will work you through it. You start low and you go slow. Because you as individuals do not know whether you need high THC, high CBD, a blended product, a balanced product, a mixed product, or no product. And the way you find that out is by taking a very slow, concise, educated, informed journey. That's all.
No, I agree with that as well. Yeah. Yep. Yes, anyone? Yep.
I'm interested to know what you're thinking of the water-based CBD or THC products that are, could be becoming really popular in the States.
Would they be mainly the isolate forms, which they've been able to make them into water soluble?
They use nanotechnology.
Actually, someone came into the pharmacy the other day about that. In Australia, I don't think they're available with regards to that. There's isolate forms, but when they're using nanotechnology and things like that, I'll have to look into that. Do you know what brand it was? I'll look into it. If it's out there, we'll be able to get it. We just probably haven't had any scripts or anything for it. It's not MedLab. Yeah, they've got special, it is that nanotechnology with that they've been able to incorporate. I think they're the only company that does do that. I don't know why that hasn't, there's two, is there?
Yeah, and I've just released a new study that will hear about two MedLab got an 8 milligram product that's going to come on a trial very soon. It's two different.
Oh, another trial, yeah.
New trial.
That's how we used to dispense the old one, was mainly through trials because people got it cheaper.
Sorry, is everyone hearing the conversation?
And with the sprays, they mainly can use less of a dose because they're absorbing more. A lot of people don't realise, say their CBD, they're dosing it under their tongue or swallowing it down, that only really about 6, maybe maximum of 8% is actually absorbed. So you're wasting a lot, where this company has just used technology to help more absorb through your mucous membranes. Therefore, they can reduce the amount of cannabis they're putting in there per mil, but it's having a greater effect in the body because more is being absorbed. And I think a lot of people, the studies just have to show, is it absorbing 6 times greater, 5 times greater, 2? The studies are showing that.
What I've found is 60%.
Yeah.
Up to 80 amount, 80%. So it's not double.
No. But you've got to look at, when you see products, it all depends, it's cost. Some of these products cost double. All depends if you're absorbing more and using less. It all comes down to price per milligram of cannabinoid versus your dose you're having. If you're having something that you've got to use twice as much, or you can use half as much, It all comes down to cost for everybody on what they can afford. And it's good technology, but it is expensive as well compared to just using an oil, if you can still get a good effect with the oil. Yeah, and you will have to use more versus just a spray. You might have to use 1/2 ml of oil versus the spray that comes out of the sprays. But, you know, everyone's using their different ways of how they're getting their cannabis therapy. Yeah? Deb?
And that's why it is such a small journey, like you were just saying, like medicine, which one you use. You might start on one that's got a little tiny bit of both products in it and move your way up through that journey. Like you don't know whether it's going to be a full spectrum and isolate or a whole THC product that's going to do it. That's why you've got to go slow. You don't just rush in and no opinion to anyone. You might want to check it. You can't just Google it and go down the street. You've got to know that practitioner or know that person to know at least that there's something area.
And that's true. Just because you start on a product, you're probably not going to end up on that product. People change and people move to flowers who I never thought would move to a flower. They move to a flower and all of a sudden life's changed completely different because the oils just weren't working for them, and vice versa and everything else. So it's your journey.
There is a big case for capsules in Australia because of our driving laws, you know, so people make their own capsules out of oil that they have and take it on a capsule so it doesn't show up on a driving test.
So if you get blood tested, it's still...
That's
Sure, but it's not an RDT,
Is there enough evidence out there for that to say? Because we do saliva hormone testing. Your hormones are in there. You're not taking your hormones via your mouth, but they're in your saliva. So I imagine the THC is in the saliva as well. That's not taken orally. I just haven't seen enough evidence to say that it's not in there.
I've got to ask a quick question, because interesting subject. Are hormones lipid soluble or are they like water soluble?
Okay.
Because that's what we're talking about here.
So hormones are more lipophilic, but when they're in the blood, they've got to go on carrier proteins. When they're in the saliva, they're in a... Very good question there, because hormones are lipophilic in nature, and that's why they can't be transported. That's why they're just not floating around in the blood. They've got to be transported on a carrier protein. Sorry, I'm thinking about that with regards to saliva, because saliva is basically a water-based, and yet they're showing up in a saliva sample. I don't know. I'll have to research that one. We've always just done saliva testing with hormones.
So you're thinking capsules, you know, when you eat capsules, it can come back up into your saliva maybe?
I'm just thinking, because when you talk about saliva, that's coming through the whole body. Yes, you're taking something orally, but when we take medicines and things like that, they tend to go systemically around the body, then they end up in the saliva with hormones. That's when they're more in their more active form, when they're in the saliva, because that's what, from a tissue point of view, what the body's using. So I would, because I've heard about this, I haven't done the research into it to see, because I have heard someone, you put it in a capsule, it bypasses that, so it's not in there. Has anyone heard of any evidence to say that that's the case?
Yes. So at the Tweed Cannabis Conference a few years ago, there was a scientist that said that it doesn't transfer from blood to saliva. Question for you though, can you do saliva testing in your laboratories?
For THC?
Yeah.
We sell saliva test kits. Yeah, anyone that orders things through us.
I was going to say, you could come and test me, because I only take capsules. And I make sure it doesn't, and I make sure it doesn't touch my tongue as well.
Have you ever done a saliva test then to see if it's, positive?
Well, take me as test number one.
They're unreliable.
I think because I don't think anyone really knows would need to do the testing in it, because I think when someone stops THC dosing, the more fat you have on board and the higher dosing that you're having on the THC, the longer it takes to get out of your body, because it likes to go into your fat cells, and that's why larger people do require slightly higher dosing as well. So it's still leaching out over all that time after you've stopped your last dose. Might have been 10 days ago, it could be in there, it might have been finished by now. Everyone's different, it could last 2 days in your system and still come up with saliva. So that doesn't prove that either, that putting it via a capsule, when someone stops dosing, it's still showing up in their saliva sample and they haven't had anything via their mouth. I'm not too sure. It's something I want to investigate a bit more, because you hear all these stories out there and I don't know what's true and what's not.
Please test me, because I'm very thorough about how I take my capsules.
Yeah, where do
I
you
make
live?
sure it doesn't touch my mouth, and I
Yep.
have a full mouth of water, and in one go.
Yeah.
I'm thorough.
Do you live at your local?
Gold Coast.
Oh yeah. Oh, maybe I can send you a saliva test kit and you
All
do
right.
it.
Folks, at the next Medican, this man's going to test me, and I'll report back to you, okay?
Yeah, we can. I'll bring some saliva tests next time. Yep.
Can I just ask one quick question?
Yeah.
I was taking the dropsy capsule for that very reason. I did a THC test and it still comes up
Yep.
in the test that I did at home.
In a saliva test. In a saliva test.
Actually, that was urine, so that would be fine.
You're on.
Yeah, urine's different.
I have been told that if you have, just say you have 18 grams, whatever your dose is, if you have it under your tongue, is it different when you put it in a capsule? Because I have been told that you get least of it in your body through the capsule.
Yes, true. Because of the first pass effects of the liver, when you take a capsule, it's going through your digestion and going through that way. So it takes longer to act. The liver has to go then through the liver first, through the portal vein. Gets metabolised. It can last a bit longer that way as well, versus under your tongue straight into your bloodstream. And we tell patients to do either or, depending if they're in a lot of pain and they don't have a vape and they're using oils, under the tongue will give them pain relief faster. And if they're not in pain, they're just having their normal dose, swallow it down, it might last a bit longer, say for a night dose or something like that. But yeah, different people who get nauseous because of an MCT carrier oil or something. Some of the things I've been reading is basically because of the cannabinoid receptors in the mouth, that's setting it off and that's making them feel sick. From that, put in a capsule and it tends to disappear. But I haven't had enough people to do that on as well. Yeah?
I do recommend to my patients that taking THC, if they don't use flour and other products, I do suggest they get the gelatin capsule because they are effective at passing that mucous membrane. It does go into the stomach. They say, oh, will it be not as effective as the bloodstream? But if you think about it, it's still in your body. It's still going to be processed and metabolized. So even if it takes 20 minutes more to be effective in using your gel cap to circumvent that, then do it because it's still going to happen. Just take it 20 minutes earlier than when you know your routine pain is going to happen. Like for that effect, that cause and effect. The gel caps, the research that I've seen, they will work, but you need to remember you've got insurances, like I said before, if they blood test you, you've got those metabolites in your system, you've got that, you're going to test positive. There's a chance you won't. If you take it in the gel cap, you won't by a tongue test because you're circumventing that, it's going through your stomach. But just remember you do have them insurances, so you will then have other issues. If you can't have a big accident, $10,000 worth of damage and they can't go off to hospital and physically blood test you, yes, you will test positive.
And that's when you're buggered. Yeah.
And if you have an adipose tissue, so you might
Yep.
take it forever and then go into a serious letdown, and it's actually excreted in that adipose tissue. So go have that blood test you then. That's why we have all these Olympics who win a medal and go and party and smoke a joint, and then ages later they're back doing their workouts again and they're positive. Sorry.
It is true. That's I don't know if anyone's done a study in that to see the difference in it. It'd be interesting. I'll do a bit of research and see. But just because someone stops dosing, it's still in saliva so many days or weeks later. So that I don't see how that when someone's taking in a capsule form how it's bypassing that. Oh, I'll do some research into it. Last couple of questions because we've got to move on.
What did PEA stand for?
Come up and see me. It's a big long word. Oh. Come on, see me. It's PAL. Oh, even this thing just says PEA in the endocannabinoid system. Palmitoethanoleamide. Come on, it's in here. I'm hopeless at big long words.
I just wanted to ask if you were excited about anything coming for patients, any new products that you were excited about patients being able to access for the first time.
I'd like the M carts. I think that's interesting where they're going to, but also being able to put those other cannabinoids moving through. That's interesting, but it's just a challenge for companies, the TGA and everything else like that. Yep. But I think it'll happen over time. Yep. But psilocybin, I think that's interesting moving forward. But that's going to be a while before it's more mainstream. It's still clinical, and I think like medicinal cannabis at first, a lot of the applications were knocked back, so only a certain amount will get through, and then over time more and more, and that'll change how they do things. But it's good that it's all been approved for now for July. so they can start. Yes, just down the back there.
I'd like to mention that juicing cannabis is actually the best way of making it on board. It's very bioavailable this way as well, so grow your own plants in here. It's very uncomplicated, and I think we should all grow against the government or for the government, whatever.
Okay, I think that's me done then. Awesome. Thank you. Come up here and I'll look at vapes and whatnot. Thanks, Michael.
I really want to thank you. It's the first time I think we've had a chemist talking here, and you realise you have become the new Aussie dealer. Really? It used to be the post office, but no, I shouldn't talk about that. Anyway, really appreciate you coming. Really appreciate it. We shouldn't have the slideshow, just get you talking to everyone, I reckon.
Thank you.
Thanks heaps, Des. Come down. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.